All right. We should be live. It says you're live. So let's hope I'm not just talking to myself. Meredith, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Meredith. I'll be
Awesome.
speaking in the second half.
Yeah, perfect. So you guys can kind of see my screen here. I've got Meredith popping up if we want to see her over here. She's hidden her video for a moment. And we are going to be presenting the Fork in the Road seminar. Thank you guys very much for watching. The big goals for this today, guys, are to help the communication process for, let's say people generally. Most of this is going to be geared towards people in and around the college decision. So let's say people anywhere from maybe 14, 15, all the way up to 25, 30 years old who are struggling a little bit with that decision of maybe what am I going to do with my life? Where do I want to go? And then from there, we're going to kind of have two different schools of thought. I'm going to start things off here and I'm going to be discussing service. I'm going to be discussing entrepreneurship, alternative paths, and maybe some reasons why, some philosophical things just about education and university that might help some parents even who might watch this understand a little bit about what goes into the decision that their kids are going to have to be making. And when kids do come to you with that really difficult decision of saying, hey, I don't think I want to go to college, or hey, I want to drop out of college and do something different, that you guys are maybe more equipped and more prepared for that conversation, and it doesn't catch you off guard and freak you out, and you don't get worried and scared for your kids and end up doing something or saying something that might long-term damage the relationship. So we're going to kick in here. I'm going to try to keep a list here for the comments as much as I can and see if I can see the comments. So if you guys have a comment and you want to put it in there, I'll see if I can see it. If not, I know Meredith has YouTube pulled up, and so we'll take questions kind of at the end. I'm going to go through this on my own, and then we'll pop questions in. But you guys can type them as you have them in the comments section, and then I'll look at the end when I'm done with the presentation and address those questions. And we can kind of have a conversation from that end as best we can over the web. Here we go. Let's have some fun. All right, so I'm Jeff Binek. I'm a veteran of the United States Army, active duty. I'm an entrepreneur, and I am a health and fitness coach. And I like to also kind of consider myself a coach to all of our teammates and the people who kind of work out in and around the friendship community. So this is kind of what I was talking about before. Big picture theme here. Kids and parents have a really hard time sitting down, I think, and navigating this discussion. And that's something that, if taken out of context, or, if we have an emotionally based conversation and we're making these decisions based off of emotion, and I'm going to talk about how I made some of these decisions based off of emotion, that can be something where we're not making the best long-term decision for our family's future or for our own future. And when we go to look for help, maybe from a parent or from a friend or somebody like that, if they have an emotional response back, a lot of times we're just going to escalate some of that emotional response. And again, typically when that happens, we're not always going to be looking at things with the most clear eyes and making the best decisions. Now, I'm an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. And so I do believe that, if you have the right mindset, you're a good person, you work hard, that you'll be able to find your own path. And I'm very blessed and lucky to have a lot of people in my life who have walked an alternative path and have, made that work for them, even though they would tell you that they made a lot of emotional and maybe bad decisions along the way. So this is kind of my quote here. And for those of you guys who don't know, I've started to kind of write a book on this topic a little bit. And, one of my kind of key things is to try to get down to kind of a thesis. And what I think is kind of a common theme amongst a lot of the people that we talk to is that quote there. So I'm just going to read that. We don't believe the system or options that we've been given are truly what's best for us. We believe in and invest in ourselves above all else because we know that the long-term return on investment of controlling our own destiny is happiness, financial independence, benefiting our community at a higher level, and walking a path that is truly unique to us. And that's, I think, the big thing here is just kind of getting to a place of understanding where we support people in our lives who walk a unique path and don't look down on them or, get negative with them because they've chosen something that's away from kind of the status quo. And so, one of the big things here is we're going to start this conversation off with trying to think about what is our real goal for our kids? What is our real goal for ourselves? And, if we really break down the decision for college, what is the real goal there? We want to be somebody who is happy, but we also want to make sure that we have some sort of a marketable trait so that we can, provide some actual help and benefit to our community, because those are the things that really then can give you back income and allow you to, eat and have a place to live and all those things. But there's a million different ways that we can skin that cat, and we'll kind of talk about some of those. So, brief background for me, guys, just kind of run through some of my decision and why I talk about this. So my education went to Worthington-Kilbourne High School, so I am a local person if you guys are watching this in Columbus, and I was a great high school student. I did very, very well up until about my senior year. I had a pretty hardcore case of senioritis. I wasn't really feeling challenged, and I had sort of started to get a little bit complacent with my thoughts and views towards high school. I played multiple sports. I had good test scores, all those things. Like, I had a lot of reasons, and I think on the surface, most people just thought I would be the normal kid who made the choice to go to college, and it was actually very shocking to people when I kind of didn't do that path. Like I said, I kind of pathed and trajectory down as I was finishing up high school. I was really getting very burned out of the educational system, what I like to call busy work, just doing work. And when I would ask why we were doing something, I was getting a lot of because that's what I said we do, or because of this, or because of that. And I wasn't getting a lot of articulation and good explanation on how that was going to be a marketable or usable skill for me to need to learn for the future. And unfortunately, I feel like that's a little bit where a lot of high school is at right now, where we're maybe spending time, and it's really, really hard for our educators to be able to tell kids why they're learning what they're learning. And so that, for me, I started to ask a lot of whys. I was very curious. Why are we learning this? Why are we spending time on this? I'm not going to pay much attention to this because, honestly, I don't see the value in it. And as an 18-year-old person, it's time to start making those adult decisions. If you don't think there's value in it, then that's your prerogative, and you don't necessarily need to spend time learning it. So I decided to go to Ohio University. And again, this is where we're going to start to talk about, and I know Meredith's going to talk a little bit about this. We've gone back and forth on this quite a bit, but I made this decision to go to Ohio University purely 100% based on emotion. I had a girlfriend that was living back in Columbus. She was a year below me, and I wanted to stay close to that. And, I didn't really honestly care too much about my education. I didn't really care too much about where I went. And I was making that decision way less on what was best for me or best for my future or best for my education, and way more on my social life, on what my friends were doing. I had friends going here. I was an hour or two drive from home, nice and easy, super simple, but ultimately that did not work out for me. So I went there for the first semester, and I didn't show up. I didn't care. I just basically kind of lived my own social life, and was just basically burned out from class right from the get-go. And the worst thing that you can do, I think, for people who are getting burned out of class is put them into a 500-person macroeconomics lecture hall and just watch them suffer and give them Scantron tests. And that was my first year, my first semester college experience, was I was taking these courses that were these gigantic halls that were Scantron. I had no personal connection with the professors, and they gave me the opportunity to just not show up and for that to not matter. So Ohio University was not a great place for me. It was not the good selection because it was such a big university. What would have been much better for me would have been to look at, teacher to student ratio and pick something that was much, much smaller. And probably for me, honestly, at that point, to really get away, to go and experience someplace new, maybe even look abroad to go to school for a year or two, and have some different experiences. So I ended up coming back home after that first year. I had obviously very, very bad grades. I think I got maybe a 1.3, which was shocking coming out of mostly a 4.0, consistent 4.0 GPA in high school. And obviously, me and my parents looked at that, and just my heart wasn't there, and made the decision to kind of move back home. And that was something for me where really, really quick realization to say, all right, school is not going to be the path for me. what are some alternative paths? And I really feel like at this time, I really walked this journey alone. All my friends seemed to be doing very well in college. They were integrated in the social life, but still showing up to school. My family was supportive, but not necessarily, somebody who I felt I could talk to about this, because both of them, walked a more traditional path as well with college and then jobs that followed. And it just wasn't a communication point for me and my family at the time. And so I felt alone a little bit in this decision. I started to kind of research, and then I'll path back to Ohio State University, because I came back and finished school after I went into the military, and basically finished with magna cum laude. I had one bad grade that really just knocked my GPA down, art history, and man, I'll tell you what, it was, school going back was easy. It was fun. It was enjoyable. I did really well. I got to know a lot of great professors that gave me great recommendations for things later in life. And with the perspective of being, in the military and treating the university more like a job, things went very well for me. And then I attended Capital University Law School for my first year of law school with the GI Bill, before kind of deciding that my current path was really the best for me, and that I was kind of doing what I was born to do. So over here, before or after Columbus State and before Ohio State on the left, I took basically a kind of 5-year break to join the United States Army, and spent basically 2004 to 2009. I got out. I did a little bit more times in the reserves and had some amazing opportunities. I'm not really here to talk too much about my military service, but had some really great opportunities there that really became the defining things in my life, and taught me discipline and structure, and gave me all of the things that I wanted. I wanted to be challenged. I needed to get out and, have a place where it said cell phones aren't an option here, right? You're just going to be working from dusk to dawn every single day for the next, year or two. So basic training to me was like the most enjoyable experience ever, because it was just exactly what I needed at that time in my life, which obviously is unique. I had a lot of different decision points. I had a lot of different, ups and downs and volunteer opportunities and stuff in the military that treated me very well. But each of those decisions were made by myself. The decision to go into the military was made 100% by myself. I signed the contract before I told my parents. And, after kind of going over and over again with having to make these decisions as an adult by myself, and realizing that your decisions have consequences, and they also provide you opportunities. And then when you're successful in those opportunities, then, it starts to build some confidence through there. After I got out of the Army, I did go back to Ohio State. And while I was going back to Ohio State, I started to work a couple jobs that honestly I hated. And I felt like I was sort of back in this same zone where I was like, yeah, man, I just spent all this time in the military. I'm such a different person. I've gained so much perspective. I'm doing really well in school, but I feel like I'm right back in the same spot. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing what I want to do. And some fun things happened, and I started a business. I started Friendship Fitness, and kind of for me, at least right now, it's the rest is history. I've created a community where I can positively impact my community. It's really great for my skill set as a person. I've been able to provide 6 full-time jobs and a bunch of part-time jobs inside of my community, help people, get off prescription drugs, beat chronic disease, meet people. We've got almost, I think, 16 weddings of people who have met at the gym, multiple different kids now who have been born out of those relationships, and has just been a total blessing in my life. And so we're coming up on 10 years as a small business ownership, which is crazy how fast time flies, but also a huge breaking point. A lot of small businesses don't make it that far, so I'm very proud of that. And it's given me all of these different things. I believe in our mission so deeply, and it gives me this amazing sense of purpose. I've been thrust now into a leadership position, and it's just been something for me that has been fantastic. Last year, I started my real estate business, and to date, I own coming up on 4 and 5 properties, and I use that as passive income for rental. So let's get into kind of why college, why that might not be the right choice for you. And so the first thing that I feel like I have to touch on for this is really, for me, this was it. It was the wrong choice for me at 18 or 19 years old. But man, at 24 and 25 and 26, I loved it. I looked forward to going to class every day. I showed up every single day, 10 to 15 minutes ahead of time. I treated it just like a job. And when you look back on it after spending so much time in the military, you're working 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. You're sleeping like 4 hours. You're just grinding away. Going to 16 hours a week of college credits is like, which is, on the higher end, 16 to 20 was what I was taking. It seemed so easy in comparison. It seemed like I still had all of this free time after studying, after going to class. It was still something for me where I was like, okay, I've still got to do more. And I started my business while I finished my degree and still maintained, very high GPA. And that's the key decision for me. Was at 18, it was wrong. It didn't mean it was wrong forever. And when I talk with kids who are 16, 17, 18, they get so caught up on, well, I'm going to be behind. And all my friends are going, it's like, behind what? Like, that's just a fallacy. Like, going back to school, changing career paths when you're 28, 29, 30, you've still got another 30 to 40 years in the workforce. And you want to make sure that those opportunities are setting you up for success and fulfillment. And so that's a key point there. And then this for me is really becoming something that I'm really focused on. We have more resources available right now, and you can have all of these different things. We'll talk about resources at the end, but you are living in an era right now that has more free resources to the greatest minds. You have access to just 3 and 4 hour conversations with these amazing philosophers and these incredible entrepreneurs and business owners and educators. And like, you can take online Harvard courses and audit Harvard courses for nothing sometimes, and very, very inexpensive, and get world-class education that was never up. Like, this is just, we've never been in such an amazing time for education. And to me, it's kind of crazy to see that at the same time that there's more free resources available, formal education is also like being inflated from a cost perspective so drastically. And so we're going to talk about some of the financial reasons first. We have a few different things. We're going to give some scenarios and some case studies here. And really the first financial reason, guys, this is why we do sort of, anything as we start looking at education, right? Is we need to see a return on investment. And if you guys see this and you don't understand what that term means, here's your first self-education pieces. You need to understand return on investment. Okay. And the thing with college that's really tough is this is hard to pin down sometimes for college for 2 different reasons. One, because a lot of people defer their investment to the future in looking at student loans and debt to provide this investment. So the money at first is not real, right? You're not handing over $20,000 in cash to the university and saying, here's my first year's tuition. You're pushing it off and saying, hey, I'm going to pay you over the next 15 years in these tiny little increments. And that credit cycle, that mentality is not a great mentality for us to get into. And then you start thinking about, okay, so the return on investment basically of college needs to be, if we are going to defer, let's say we have $800 a month of student loan payments. Well, then we need to be thinking about over that time, we need to be making $801 to get that return on investment, more than we would have been making had we not gone to school. And that's an oversimplification. There's all other sorts of things that can play into this, but that's sort of what we're thinking about here. So college is this at its core, is you need to be able to get more out of your education after the fact and be able to get better jobs or start better businesses with the education that you get so that you can, be a more marketable person when you get out. Most people don't understand this because you're 17 years old, you're 18 years old, you're signing a contract on something before you even understand what debt means, before you even understand what return on investment means, before you even understand how to handle a household's finances. And this is going to be something that we talk about later, about how we're forced into this decision, or we feel forced. We're not forced, but we feel forced into this decision before we understand some of these really, really basic but very important financial concepts. crippling debt is the big reason here. And when we get to these scenarios, you guys will see how crippling this can be. And, we just finished paying off my wife's debt. And this is the thing that's so crazy about college debt is there is a staggering percentage of people who have student loan debt and no degree. And that's the worst of both worlds. Is you're sitting there, and I think for Maria, we had maybe $15,000 or $20,000, and she left school and didn't finish her degree. And so she gets none of the upside of the return on investment, and she still has all of the downside. And at $20,000, our monthly payments and paying that down wasn't impossible, right? That was manageable. But when you start looking at getting into the $100,000 or $200,000 zone, when you start looking at the monthly payments for that, and you start looking at even good incomes coming out of college, it gets to be something where the numbers get out of whack really, really fast, which is why we're starting to see a major credit problem in our country. And we'll talk about that more here in a second. And that's what we talk about here, guys, is you're signing an adult contract. And the number one thing is we need to understand what that contract means. You cannot get out of this contract. You cannot declare bankruptcy. You're just basically crossing your fingers and hoping and praying that a Democrat gets elected in this next election and that Democrat is actually able to give student loan forgiveness off. Otherwise, you've got this contract sitting on your books for the next 10 or 15 years. And then this is where when we start talking about the military, you guys will be able to see how absolutely incredible this was. For me, where I'm at, my family is at a place now where we feel comfortable financially because of the GI Bill. I almost give 100% of the credit to how amazing this opportunity was for me to be self-sufficient from a finance perspective. And then this is the big thing, guys, is the education that we're getting is very bare bones. And if number two, the Jean Angelis are watching here, right? He would tell you that you go to law school and you get all of these different things and you get this degree and you pass the bar and you have all of this big education. But then when you get into the job, you're only going to use this like real small amount of it. And almost any job that you go to, you're going to find that to be true, where you're basically getting a general bare bones kind of outlier. You're almost learning how to learn a lot of the time. And the education, when you start getting into something that's job specific, isn't going to be complete. You're not going to be able to walk into a job and say, I can do every aspect of this job right out of college. That almost doesn't exist anywhere. And you can talk to all sorts of business owners, administrators, whoever you want to talk to with that. It's almost sort of an on-rain joke where we almost have to break a lot of college kids of the assumption that they are ready to be a major part of the workforce when they're not, because the education still requires you to be job specifically trained and then also self-educated on all of these other things like personal finance, health and fitness, mental health and wellness, and all these other things that we're going to talk about later. And this is kind of what we're talking about, is the incomplete education piece of things. Really, when we start talking about these things right here, personal finance, health and fitness, self-care, mental resiliency, tact, judgment, communication, persuasion, those, like if you were to take those things, if I were to say, hey, you've got somebody who has these 8 skill sets and they are world class at each of them, you'd be like, wow, I bet that person's like a stud. I want to see him. I want to meet him, because you can do a lot of things with that skill set. And so as we start looking at that, we're paying and we're having sometimes crippling debt with something that's going to just require us to do more anyway. And anybody who's graduated with a degree and then said, well, I need to go back and get a master's, or I need to go back and get this, or I need to go back and to get that. You're like, all right, come on. That's tough, because you're already in debt a decent amount. And now we're saying you're going to go and get more formal education when we don't necessarily know where that formal education is going to take us outside of maybe networking. And then this is the big thing here, guys, is, so just read that statement, right? 4-year degree average cost $52,000 to $104,000, while the wages have increased only $5,000 between 1989 and 2016. And so that's just kind of a crazy statistic there, but something to kind of keep in mind of the return on investment piece here is, you would not take that return on investment any day of the week, right? Where your debt is ballooning from 52 to 104,000, where your pay to be able to cover that is not. So we're going to discuss these three scenarios financial, and we're going to try to keep this guys down pretty quick here, but I do feel like sometimes this is where you guys will start having questions. So first we're going to discuss a student who's going to finance their education 100% with debt. And Meredith's going to do a great job of talking about how you should place kind of some self-limitations and caps on the debt that you're going to take. I'm going to leave that to her because that's her area of expertise here. And obviously, that's going to be something that you want help with and you need to discuss with your kids if they are looking at financing their education. So let's say we start at 18, we go to Ohio State University, takes you 4 to 5 years to graduate, right? And this is all in state. And so we start looking at what the average rates are for student loans right now and what we're looking at for our monthly loan payments after graduation. And so these were just grabbed right off of the loan calculator on the main FAFSA website. And you're looking at somewhere around that $1,400 mark if you finance your education entirely. And so what we think about this, guys, is, again, if you're 16, 17, 18 years old, you've probably never worked a job enough to where you understand what $1,400 is in real money. And as we start thinking about that, like that's a scary, scary prospect where that number is not necessarily real to you. You don't understand how much you have to work just to get $1,400 in this. And so let's say you just graduate at 22, you enter the workforce with a business degree. The entry-level job at JP Morgan Chase that'd be a pretty good firm. I think most people, graduating out, if you want to be somewhere, and these are graduate level positions. These aren't like entry level with no education, right? So $41,000. And let's say at 25, you get promoted to that next tier for them, which is about $62,000 to $65,000. And so what we're looking at is after taxes, right? We're looking at about $2,600 per month coming into your bank account. And that's where taxes get you, right? You're a W-2 employee. And so making $40,000 a year after taxes, you're going to get about $2,600 in your bank account. And right away, that $1,400 has got to go to the student loan payment. Now, obviously, you can choose to not pay it down. You can choose to do the minimum payment and just continue to kind of defer this down the road and down the road and down the road. But if we're looking to start paying this off, right, this is kind of where we need to be for this. So you're left with about $1,200 here. Your affordable rent inside of Columbus right now, if you're taking on with a roommate, you're going to be somewhere between $650 and $750 a month. And so we've got $450 left for food, cell phone, utilities, insurance, etc. For me, I spend personally about $550 to $600 a month in food. So right there, we're lost. Cell phone bill is going to be somewhere around $60 to $100. Utilities, right? Man, those can get out of control. Health insurance, you just might as well, write that off for the most part. You're not going to have it. And so those things are going to start to become tough unless JP Morgan Chase obviously is paying 100% of it. So you're going to have a really tough time given this financial picture to save 1% of your income at all until you get that promotion up to that $62,000 range at 25. And what's tough about this is these are the years where you can start to stack compounding interest and start to really get ahead financially. And the other piece of this, guys, that's really, really challenging is we're sort of stuck into some of these things. So we're sort of stuck into, roommate situations. We need a job that has good health insurance. And more than likely, if we're adding any sort of funds, let's say we take vacations, or let's say we take, we want to go out, or we want to go out to bars, or we want to do this or that. A lot of times what's happening now is that stuff's getting put on credit cards, and now credit card debt is actually coming really close to student loan debt in terms of how we do that. So at 20, let's say we're 25 years old is what we said when we get our promotion. At 25 years old, we've got zero investable assets, and we're basically living paycheck to paycheck. So it's a kind of a bleak picture. So we get no dividend and rental income, and our debt sits at about $170,000 when you factor in the interest that we're going to have. That does not count any credit card debt at all. Okay, so that's about where we're looking for that student with debt financing for their entire education. Obviously, that's a pretty bleak picture, but I think it's really important for you guys as parents. If I were to sit and tell you right now, hey, your son's going to get a $40,000 a year job right out of college as soon as they graduate, and they're going to be promoted up to the managerial level and get $62,000 to $70,000 at the age of 25. You'd probably be like, Yeah, that's pretty good. Awesome. Like, that's great. JP Morgan's a great company. They've been around forever, blah, 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 right? But you can see that the financial picture is still very, very challenging there. And obviously, guys, we're going to take into account, like, obviously there are things over here where you can do things that can be better. And obviously things could be better, things could be worse, etc. I'm just trying to create some blanket statements here. So the next two guys are going to be, the military one obviously is going to follow pretty close to my path. So I actually joined the military at 19. I got out at 24. My average salary was about $20,000 to $24,000, and I had a $20,000 cash signing bonus. Obviously, taxes are taken out of that also. I know, right? $24,000 salary. I was raking it in at E3. But you don't have any living, so I was able to live in the barracks. So you have no rent, right? Food is provided for you at the cafeteria every day if you want to have it. It's not great food, but you can survive on it. And you have no insurance expenses, no nothing, no copays, anything like that. So if you eat out and you have a cell phone, that's about it. But you don't have utilities, no electric, no gas. I think you do have to pay internet at most places, or at least you did while I was in. That might be better now with like a Wi-Fi available for everybody. But your expenses are very, very, very low, right? I had some car expenses, but I was able to use that $20,000 cash signing bonus to pay cash for a car and pay my insurance off pretty easily with that. And you can go there. So this is about what I was saving. So I was saving about 50% of every single dollar that I earned, including my cash signing bonus. And I was taking online classes the entire way that I was in. Now, quick tip for you guys, if you're going to take online classes when you're in the military, make sure that you check with the university that you're eventually probably going to get a degree from, and make sure that the credits transfer over, because most of mine did not, and that was basically then just a complete waste of time. And so when you separate from service, this is really where you start to get the financial benefit of the military. So a couple things. One, I got laser eye surgery, which has just been a total blessing in my life. And I got that for free in the military, along with another couple medical things that really helped me out. And then when I got out, I had the GI Bill sitting for me, and the GI Bill is fantastic. So you get a housing stipend just to go to school. You have a 100% of tuition. So you get 100% of tuition paid. You get a housing stipend. You get $1,000 a semester for books. And then they help you and support you, because most of the times your tuition is going to also include your healthcare. You get all that stuff kind of built in as well. I worked part-time and made roughly $20,000 a year. Like I said, I didn't love the jobs that I did, so I was kind of ebbing and flowing in between there. But once I started kind of doing some personal training stuff for a little extra cash, I started to come close to that. And from there, once I finished my degree, I had the opportunity. I could go straight into the workforce, or I could have gone, like I said, I went to law school for a year. I had those opportunities. Or you could move into, a lot of the people that I got out with, they started to look into being either an MD or a JD, or getting some sort of a business master's degree. And all of that is basically free. Right. So pretty cool to not have to pay a dime for law school or medical school. So great opportunity there. Right. So if we think about that whole time, so the whole time you were 18, and again, we're 25 or 26. I think I graduated at 26 years old. So at 26, we've been saving 50% of our income. Okay. We're sitting at somewhere around $113,000. That's just if we put it into like a checkings account, right? We were just letting it roll. That's without any interest. We have no debt because there's no student loan debt. And you can have a higher level degree, job experience, veterans benefits, veterans preference. If you guys are looking at jobs that give veterans preference, most jobs do now. And you have healthcare covered that entire way through, which is all pretty cool. Entrepreneurial. So this is sort of the other part of my path. And this is kind of something that I tell people now what I maybe would have done if I could have taken it back here. And you think about, and this is going to be one of our case studies that we talk about, you think about instead like, I don't know about education, right? But I'm just going to try to think about being involved with as many different workforce opportunities as possible. And it can be anything. I know a couple people, Sean on our podcast this week talks about his experience with construction, right? He left school, started working for construction. And what he would tell you is after I was in it for a little while, then that motivated me to go back to school, because I started to realize, okay, my ceiling without the educational piece of this is a little bit lower, and just grinding away working on construction all day maybe isn't where I want to end my career. So pick a career, right? Pick wherever you want to go. Let's say you're not going to make very much, but I would say generally if you're waking up at 5 in the morning, you're working away on construction as a hairstylist, personal trainer, fitness coach, like you're going to be able to make that $30,000 a year mark and do that relatively comfortably. At 21 to 24, let's say you get promoted, right? And maybe you go back and you finish an associate's degree, or you gain more personal training clients would be a great way to do that, or you move up and you start maybe being a foreman or a project manager or something like that from the construction zone. And we work to save 30% of every dollar earned through that time. And we're going to talk about living below our means here in a little bit, which is going to be a fundamental piece and a fundamental misunderstanding. And also something I didn't talk over here about a student with debt is I didn't really discuss their rental costs and everything as they were kind of going through school if they wanted to add that in. So this is what I always recommend for people. If you guys don't know what house hacking is, I highly recommend looking it up or live at home to decrease your cost of living and get free living. Invest that money that you're saving very wisely throughout those 3 years. Again, one of our case studies will basically define this path entirely. And then at 24 years old, you've essentially got 6 or 7 years in the industry, right? You've moved up a little bit. You've saved a little bit of money, and you can start to look at possibly opening your own gym, starting your own construction company, or maybe discuss talking to the person who owns a construction company that you've worked for a few years. Like this is kind of a little bit diving into Sean's path. Or, hey, I'm going to start a beauty salon out of my home and start there until I can gain enough clients to maybe open up my own small shop and start that. And start basically taking your investable assets and putting them into assets that grow, right? That earn income. So creating businesses and using rental income as a possibility. So if you guys don't know what house hacking is, that's where our dividend and rental income will be. And if we invest that money wisely that we're saving the whole time, we can start to go there. Again, we have no debt. We haven't taken on any debt outside of maybe if we want to make our business that we first start a little bit bigger. And we can have some of these different things in terms of providing jobs, providing resources and opportunities, and helping our community to kind of get there. So these are the jobs I look at, right? Construction might be able to be automated, okay? But a hairstylist, I think we're pretty far away from being a robot taking that job, and a personal trainer, I think we're maybe kind of far away from a robot taking that job. There are automated and there are electronic ways that you can get personal trained, but they're not perfect yet, not fantastic. So that's my last one. No chance of a robot taking those jobs. So you can start those businesses and do very, 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 very well comparatively to kind of some of your counterparts. So case study here. So this is Alex Sanchez. This was a great story that was on CNBC. They did a little mini documentaries there. I've got the link at the end for you guys. And he chose to do that last one. So he chose to go the entrepreneurial path here. And so he works, and we'll kind of break down. So he dropped out of college. He's basically comes from an immigrant family that has been relatively low income his whole life. He started to go to community college and really found out that the debt was not going to help his family now, which they needed help now. And so he started to look for opportunities and jobs that would pay for education for him, and start to look for jobs where he could work basically unlimited overtime. He became a pole climber, and ironically, again, a lot of synergies with Sean's discussion this week in the podcast, and basically started to work this job, and then we'll kind of go down. So he lives at home with his parents from the time that he was 18 until I think in this he's about 24 when he starts doing this article. He works for his earned income. So he works a lot of overtime hours, 60 to 70 hours a week as a pole climber, and he makes somewhere around $120,000 a year doing that. And they paid for his education to go learn how to do all of this. So go learn how the electrical end of it as well as the climbing end of it. He uses that extra money that he saves on living below his means, right? Living at home with his family and helping them pay the bills, as well as decreasing his overall costs. And he basically invests those in passive assets. So he started a lawn care business, which he has hired managers for, and basically for him is completely hands-off and passive. And he purchases rental properties with cash not creating any extra debt, and is paying cash for them to earn him extra cash flow and income. And then this is the thing, this is one of the quotes from the article. And again, I posted the article at the end so you guys can kind of read through this case study in depth, and it's really cool. But talking about basically how he tries to save 80% of his income. So we talked back, if we go last slide, we said 30% of our income, right? He's saving 80% of his income. And again, this all comes back to kind of living below your means. And obviously he's a little bit obsessed with budgeting. When you read the article, it breaks down every single dime that he makes. And so here's one of the things that I love about this. Oh, I'm missing my next piece. All right. Let's do slide 10. Actually, hold on, we'll exit here. Sorry, guys. We were pretty good. All right, so here's kind of what I love about this is he's goal-driven and he's self-educated, basically. So he found something to kind of start here. But while he was working this extra income job, he basically went through and started reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and started researching rental properties and how to start a business and, reading the E-Myth and some of these other books I'm going to recommend at the end here to start to learn how you can start to create your own sources of passive income from your earned income and learning how to take earned income and turn it into assets that work for you. He's got great work ethic. Obviously, he's not afraid to go and work at, what would be most people would consider a blue collar job for 60 to 70 hours a week. And this is one of the fundamental things that quote unquote millennials, and I'm a millennial, right? So I accept that term. But this is one of the things that millennials, let's see if I get this right now. Let's just do this. Presenter view. Perfect. All right, here we are. Perfect. This is one of the things that millennials get kind of bashed on a lot is that they're afraid to work below their means jobs, or they're afraid to work jobs that are labor required, and that they don't have a great work ethic. And this is one of those things where living below your means and, biting that bullet of living at home a little bit longer and really working is going to do wonders for you kind of down the road. And so basically the numbers are all run. He'll be a millionaire by the time he's 30. His rental properties that he'll be purchasing with cash will provide him over $15,000 of passive income. If he wants to buy his rental properties in the future with debt, he can. Otherwise, he's debt free. And real estate as an investment is very tax advantaged, if not tax neutral. And if he wanted to go back to college in the future, he could pay cash for it. Right? He doesn't even have to take out student loans. He'll be a millionaire. And honestly, if you go from doing all of this, starting businesses, working 60, 70 hours a week as a pole climber and running rental properties, college is going to seem pretty simple to you, right? So sometimes that experience and going later in life can be a huge positive for you. All right, so let's get to that next slide. Next one, you guys might know this guy, JD Vance. And so he walked more of that military path. Okay. So JD is from rural Ohio. He had a very low income upbringing. There's a lot of addiction, a lot of divorce. He was raised by his grandparents. And if you guys haven't read the book, we'll talk about it here in a second, but kind of breaks down a little bit where he comes from. He joined the Marine Corps at 18 and went into college at Ohio State University after he got out. He did tours in Iraq and, had that experience under his belt. Obviously, then at Ohio State, he did really well because he went to Yale Law School. So one of, people would argue, the top law school arguably in the entire world, and especially if you're going to go more of a judiciary path. And so Yale Law School is, that's super impressive. And this is a guy, especially when you start looking at kind of the means that he came from. And we'll talk about a little bit why I love this so much. He's an accomplished author now. He wrote Hillbilly Elegy, which has been signed on by Ron Howard, who's probably the #1 producer in all of movies. For the movie is coming on soon. It's a very, very popular book and definitely worth a read if you guys haven't before. He's a venture capitalist, so he's an entrepreneur. And he started this company with Peter Thiel, who's one of the top investors ever. And their goal is to invest in mostly tech startups, but startups in the Rust Belt, so in our area right now. And then he's a buddy and philanthropist with the company Our Ohio Renewal. So, this is cool because this is very close. This is tight to Ohio, right? This is an Ohio case study. And what I love about it is he used the Marine Corps as an opportunity, kind of like me, to get away, right? So get away from a place where he was not feeling like he could be successful. And then he used it as a launching pad for him to set himself up for success later in life. He's highly educated now, and he's maximized each of his opportunities that the military gave him afterwards. And obviously, he's a huge action taker. If you guys have ever tried to write a book, getting that across the goal line is very, very tough, as well as starting your own venture capital firm and being a budding philanthropist is also, those are very challenging things, as I'm sure law school is, and so on. And his life after education, making sure that he's staying motivated and he's doing things to support our community, and he's leading and creating jobs and in the area that he was basically coming from. So one of the biggest things with Ohio, if you guys don't know, is we're trying to create jobs to help support our community. So it's very, very worthwhile. And then, so those were most of the financial reasons, a couple of case studies there. I'm going to start flying through because I'm getting towards the end of my time here, guys. But reasons of the heart, right, that we might not go. Passion, right? For me with education, my passion was not there anymore. And so now that looking back, I didn't like the paint by the numbers approach. If you would have told me that I could have created my own educational path, I would have been very interested in that. Right? If you would have told me that I had freedom to explore different places and opportunities and count that as quote unquote college credit, I would have been very intrigued by that. But as it is, they say this is your curriculum to get your journalism degree and go, right? You have to take these classes this semester, this time. You have to take a foreign language. And I dealt with this when I went back to school, right? I'm taking sign language with a bunch of the Ohio State football players because you have to take a foreign language to get your credits for your degree. And that, to me, it still kills me to this day. I think it's just a massive, massive waste of people's time and money. And, this is one of the big things for people is a lot of people don't want a job where they go and work a 9 to 5 in an office, and they just don't believe in that. And from a passion perspective, I think if you guys as a parent have a son who's choosing that, I think that that's one that we should be able to empathize with. And kind of as we go down this list, guys, we start thinking about, how fulfilled are we by, and how much do we believe? Where's our fulfillment and belief in the opportunity that college is providing for us? And this is just trying to get you guys, especially as parents and especially as kids watching this is trying to get you guys to see a little bit of, their view, like be empathetic with why they might be struggling, and try to understand from their end what they might be going through. And, if we lose sight of some of this stuff, I think that this is a massive, massive issue with why we are seeing so many mental health issues in our country is I don't think that we have a lot of passion. I don't think we have a lot of belief, and I don't think we have a lot of fulfillment in how we're helping our communities and how we're helping our fellow man in what we're spending our time and our lives and our careers doing. And I think that leaves a big gap for a lot of people. This is the big one for me, is building that confidence, and you believe in yourself above what other people are going to kind of tell you to do or want you to do, and taking that nice and high. And so I have some different thoughts and comments kind of about some of those kinds of things, but it's that that idea of if you believe more in the system than you do in yourself, it's that mentality. Like if I were to tell you right now, would you rather me take $10,000 so that I, as the U.S. government, can invest that money for you? Or would you rather take $10,000 and start your own business, right? Which one would you want to do, right? Do you believe in other people and what they tell you that you should be doing and what their investments are going to be, and that they have your best judgment and, future in mind? Or do you believe in what you want to do? And that's sort of the mentality that I kind of go into this with is I want to make the best opportunities for me. I'm the only person who can make the best choices for me. And a lot of educational opportunities don't necessarily do that. And then we can start to think about, how the system is working and what our future is going to look like. Right now, the pace of the economy is so challenging to see what the future is going to look like and what jobs will be there and what jobs won't be there. And that's just one of those things where, it's tough to invest $100,000 or $200,000 in an education when that job just might not even be there in 10 or 15 years. And so that should scare some people, I think, just generally as we look at some of that. And then happiness as the goal. I think sometimes a road less traveled can be a big path to happiness. And, the struggles for me, they were challenging. There's no doubt about that. And, I had definitely some big struggle points. But I will say that I look back and I wouldn't change a thing. The journey was an adventure because of that. And I enjoyed that. I gained a lot from it from a self-confidence standpoint and so on. So our 3 scenarios of the heart, we're not going to spend too much time here. I'm actually going to kind of skip through this. I will send this slide deck out so if you guys want to watch later. And we kind of look at why some of the student ratio might be tough for people because it doesn't set you up for success with, with how we kind of come out of that as a person. So where are we going to go, right? Principle-based self-education. This is the big thing, regardless of what path you choose. Military, entrepreneurial, I believe that students should do it also, is we need to be thinking about controlling our own education, right? Do not rely on, the college or wherever you're going to go for that education, and define some principles that you can start to study and knock out while you're 18, 19, 20, 21. And these are the principles that are going to be true now until the day you die. Things that if you lock in now, you are going to be drastically ahead of your peers. You're going to have a more pain-free life, a more carefree life. And these are the big things for me. Obviously, if you guys know me, you know that exercise and nutrition, taking care, you get one mind and you get one body, right? And that's what this is about, is taking care of those things. One mind, one body, right? And if you are on top of these first kind of 3-4 things, you are going to be a sharper individual, and whatever you decide to do, you will be more with it and more coherent and more, have the ability to take in more information better because you're in a better place mentally. And then you're going to learn all of these different relationship and communication strategies and develop those kinds of things. Because a lot of this is going to become very important for you as you start thinking about, when we get to 25, it's like, okay, if your peers over here did, the classic, we finance our entire education, and we have a lot of debt, and we're very stressed. We haven't exercised. We eat poorly. We have no idea about stress management or meditation. We have poor mental health, right? And we aren't sleeping, and we have a ton of debt, all of which kind of hurts our ability to exercise or learn how to eat or manage stress. It actually provides quite a bit of stress. Like one of the only times I've ever seen Maria cry in my life is when we started having the talk about how much debt she was in. And those kinds of things you get 24, 25-year-old kids who are dealing with all of that. And that's where we start to look at like, okay, if you're a kid over here and you just have no debt, you are in fantastic shape, you exercise, you eat really well, you have no stress in your life, right? You have great meditation and stress management habits, you have amazing relationships and communication strategies, you're sleeping 8 or 9 hours a night. If we just take those things apart and let's just not even talk about your job, like, you're probably going to be quite a bit happier of a person. You're probably going to have more opportunities in your life just because of how much better you look and feel every single day, and how much more open you're going to be to optimism and opportunity. And so we talked about this a little bit earlier. So now for some resources, guys. I've starred some of the ones, and if you guys want this slide deck, just put a comment in there and send me your email address, or you guys can always email me at just jeff@friendshipfitness.com and I can send it to you. But these are all linked out for books and podcasts and self-educational resources for you guys to kind of look into and start to dive into your own pursuit, your own journey of knocking out some of these awesome things that we can start to get ourselves dialed in on early in life while we kind of figure out what we want to do. And so these are all kind of here along with the case studies that we talked about. And if I really had to hammer in here, guys, these are the big things that I would think about, right? If I was 18 to 22, it's all about building good relationships, right? Some would call that networking, but let's just say building good relationships, learning, right? And whatever that means for you, right? There's a million different things that you can learn about. And even if you're spending that time learning about how to eat properly and how to meditate and traveling the world and seeing different cultures and different opportunities around the world, there's all sorts of different ways that you have to learn. Learning does not have to be formal education. And when we come out of that at 24, 25, 26, 28, 30, you're going to have a better idea at those ages what you're all about and what you want to do. And if you come out of that in great shape with a good head on your shoulders, with great relationships, and you know how to take care of yourself, and that stuff's on autopilot, like, you're going to have a great future in front of you, absolutely, regardless of what you guys are choosing to do for money or fulfillment or to give back to your community. So that's kind of my last piece there, guys. And I'm going to kick things over to Meredith now. And hopefully she is there. Let's see. She is. Hello.
I am still here.
Awesome. And so let me see. Can I see if I can get on YouTube here to see if there's any comments? Great relationships. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, cool. No comments. Sweet. Perfect. So I'm going to, let's see, we'll do this. And then Meredith, all you have to do is share your screen.
I'm on it. Let me get the slideshow running here.
Exit full screen. Perfect.
So, and I'm going to start here by introducing myself a little bit. Some folks in the friendship community know me from class, but a lot of people don't know me particularly well at this point still. So I'm Meredith Graham. I'm the director of CollegeWise office here in Columbus, Ohio. A quick little bit about CollegeWise before I get going too much farther. CollegeWise is the nation's largest private college counseling company. And private college counseling is basically like hiring a private tutor or a private coach to help you with the college process. It's not necessarily a big thing here in the Midwest. It's kind of a bigger thing on the coasts for the most part. Most of the time around here, when I tell people what I do, they say, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. But it is a thing. And quite honestly, part of what Jeff was saying about those difficult conversations between parents and students, that's one of the reasons that I have a job, because we're sort of a neutral third party to help families navigate some of those conversations. So CollegeWise is based in Irvine, California. We've been around since 1999. And since 1999, we've helped more than 12,000 students to attend more than 800 different colleges. So we've got almost 80 counselors now around the US and a couple other places globally as well that do this kind of work. We also do a ton of outreach. So seminars like this publicly, also sort of jointly with friends of CollegeWise, if you will. And we really believe that the college process has gotten out of control. And our mission is to increase the joy and decrease the stress of the college process. So that's really what we're all about. A little bit about my background here then. I have my official headshot, but I figured I'd use my friendship headshot since I am a part of the friendship community. And thanks, Jeff, for taking the shot in class that day, or whoever it was from class who took that shot. So I have been working in and around higher education since 1998. I started at Kent State, paying my way through grad school as a graduate assistant in the admissions office, which basically was as a part-time admissions counselor in that office. And so since then, I've worked at 4 different universities in 4 different states, but all of my work has been around admissions, academic advising, and recruiting, primarily with first-year students, but a little bit with transfer students as well, particularly within, when I was at Cornell, I was in charge of the transfer applications to the College of Engineering, as well as freshman applications from the rest of the country. So I actually read applications from Ohio all 7 years there, read more than 10,000 applications during my 7 years at Cornell, which is absolutely as many as it sounds like. That's actually where these came from. But I love what I do. I love being a private counselor. I love helping families navigate these kinds of conversations. And there's a note down there at the bottom that says I'm a hybrid counselor. That's because I work with families here locally, but I also work predominantly online. So I'm on Zoom right now. I spend a lot of time on Zoom. Work with families across the country as well as around the world, sort of navigating these conversations and discussions as well. So I actually redid this presentation, I think 4 separate times since Jeff and I started talking about this. So I think I've ended up being able to sort of complement a lot of what he's saying when we were having our conversations about it. But before I get into it, I want to sort of start with a little bit of a story. I was talking with a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and just sort of getting caught up about, life and family and everything like that. And he told me that his son had come home from school and had announced that he was not going to go to college and that he instead wanted to become a tattoo artist. And my friend admitted that he absolutely lost it when his son said that. And his son has not had the easiest time in high school. It's been kind of a struggle for him all the way along the way. So it wasn't a huge surprise on some level that his son was saying, I'm not doing the college thing. But he said, he and I had a long conversation, and he said ultimately what his wife said to him, she looked at him and said, you know what, our son's life is not going to look anything like what you imagined. And you have to get okay with that. You have to be okay with that. And he said, I know she's right, but I'm having a hard time reconciling that with sort of what I imagined his life to be like. And I think that really sort of goes to the core of this whole conversation. What Jeff's talking about, what I'm talking about here too, is the idea that, this is a transition time. When students are sort of headed off to what's next after high school, that's really the first time for students that their destiny is their own. I mean, when they're under the age of 18, when they're in high school, you're on sort of this prescribed path. I mean, yeah, you have some choices about what classes you take, but by and large, your parents are the ones who are making the decisions. It's not the students who are making the decisions about the direction that they want their lives to go. And this is the transition time. This is the time where it becomes the student who gets to self-determine, gets to decide where they want to go. Now, it is a family decision if they are going to go to college, because it's usually mom and dad who are paying the bills. But it really is the student who ultimately is the one who has to get the job done. They're the one who has to go to college, has to make it happen if that's really what they want to do. So I don't happen to believe that everyone needs to go to college, despite the work that I do. I actually believe that there are a lot of other paths. And I do believe too that just like Jeff, that sometimes going to college is better down the road, not immediately. So when we're working with our students, what we do is we talk with our students first and foremost about, do you want to go to college? And why do you want to go to college? Because that's really an important question. It's not just, do you want to go to college, but really sort of that self-awareness piece, thinking about why it is you want to go to college. And for a lot of students, I mean, even echoed with Jeff's story earlier, it's just sort of what's next. And that may not be the best reason to go to college, just sort of following along because you're not really sure what else to do. So really spending some time developing that self-awareness and thinking about why you want to go. Right now, the broad social press, the main reason that students and families say, oh, I want to go to college, or I want my student to go to college, is to get job training, to get a job. And that's not the only reason to go to college. It may be your reason, but it's not the only reason. For some people, it's about going so that they can learn how to learn, so that they can adapt with the changing workforce, so that they are able to do the job that's 15 or 20 years down the road that doesn't even exist right now. That actually is a viable reason to go to college. It's also possible to consider going to college because you want to go somewhere completely different and connect with people in a learning environment in a way that's different from what you have done thus far in your life, to be surrounded by resources, this huge aggregation of resources that you might not find elsewhere. That's also a valid reason. It's also, sometimes students and families, the choice to go to college is about social signaling, because it sort of says something about you, or sometimes you think it says something about you if you can say, well, my child's going to Harvard, or I'm in the honors college in Ohio State. That there's sort of a warm fuzzy that goes along with that for a lot of people. It says something about you and about your family, about your student, if you're able to respond to questions like that. So that sometimes is why somebody would choose to go to college. And so really, again, taking that time to think about why, what's your motivation? And when you're applying to college, a lot of times colleges are going to ask you to write an essay about why are you applying to this college? So having good reasons about why you're applying really makes a difference. It's really helpful for you in the midst of this entire process. You're going to make better choices. And I am going to come back and talk about sort of this self-awareness piece again a little bit later on in the presentation. So it's going to come back around again here in a few minutes. So for those of you who are not interested in going to college, or if you're not sure, or if you really have no idea what you want to do with your life, that's okay. It's okay to not know at the age of 17. Most people don't actually know at the age of 17. One of the resources that I think is really great is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can see I've got the website down there, and this is a screen grab from it a couple weeks ago when I was putting this together. And so you can actually go in, and it's got different jobs and careers and occupations arranged by category or alphabetically, or you can go in and do what I did here, which is filter by the level of education you need, what kind of on-the-job training is available. And then for this one, I sort of click the projected growth rate, but you can actually, filter on a number of different areas as well. And so you can see, if I decide that I just want to go out and get a job right away, what opportunities are out there for me? If I decide I want to get a job with on-the-job training or with an apprenticeship, what opportunities exist? And so then if you click on the links on the left, where it says carpenter or electrician, it'll actually take you into this whole deep dive screen where it talks about the job, what's involved in it, what are the surroundings like? Are you going to be in an office? Are you going to be outside? Is it unpredictable? How safe is it? What are the financial prospects? What kind of employment do you, or what kind of training do you need? How do you access that training? One of the things I think is interesting in there is that it also talks a little bit about regional and state specific differences. So if you wanted to go in and see what are the prospects like for a fish and game warden in the state of Ohio. Nationally, fish and game warden, there's expected to be a slight increase over the next decade. They're going to be looking to do some hiring and maybe a little bit of an increase in hiring. But those opportunities really aren't here in Ohio. So if somebody decided they wanted to be a fish and game warden and they wanted to stay here in Ohio, that may not be sort of a good combination for that individual. So again, just sort of spending a little time thinking about that. I think that that's an important element of this to dig into. And I know when I was 17, I probably would have rolled my eyes if my mom had suggested that I spend some time on this website trying to figure out what I was interested in doing with my life. But I will say that it can be really beneficial. And, for students who are thinking, what, I don't want to go to college or I'm not sure, it's going to go a lot better for you if you can tell your parents you have a plan. And this is one of the ways that you can develop a plan for yourself and say, what, I don't want to go to college. I want to become a carpenter. Here's what I know it's going to take for me to become a carpenter. And here are the steps that I'm going to take. Here's my plan in order to become a carpenter. Mom and dad are probably going to feel a lot better about it if you're able to say, here's what I've decided. And this will also show, of course, jobs that require college or that require post-college as well. So it's also going to show things that are associate's degrees. It's going to show things that are bachelor's degree level. It's going to show things that are master's or PhD level as well. So you can take a look at all of them and also see whether or not you're headed into something where the robots are going to take over your job, which, by the way, Jeff and I have been joking about this a little bit. There actually is a website you can go to that's Will Robots Take My Job? And it'll actually assess with a bunch of the different career fields, what's the likelihood that robots will take your job so that your particular job is going to be automated. And Jeff and I were both really thrilled to learn that our respective jobs are very low on the likelihood of robots taking them over. But you can Google that and take a look at it. It actually is kind of a fun website. So say you're looking at this then and you're thinking, okay, maybe I do want to do a little bit of college. Maybe I want to stick my toe in the water. Maybe I want to keep that option open for myself. Great, no problem. You can do that. One way that you can do that is by starting at a community college or regional campus, depending on where you are. Again, I'm also based here in Columbus, so I have Columbus State information here. But if you're somewhere else and watching, you can take a look at what options are available near you as well. You can do anything from taking a single class at a community college just to see what that college thing is going to be like, to doing a certificate, which a certificate is usually just 2 or 3 classes in a very specific area. So if you're thinking, I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this great idea for a business, but I don't know the first thing about creating a website, and I want to create something really, really, really banging. And I feel like Wix isn't going to do it for me. And I'm having a hard time teaching myself how to use Adobe. Great. You can actually do a certificate in some of the different Adobe software products at Columbus State, 2 or 3 classes. And then you can have the skill set and somebody there teaching you. You can also do full associate's degree programs there, which is a 2-year degree. Or starting at an associate's level and then planning for transfer for 4 years to a 4-year degree program. A couple of different things I wanted to mention here, and I have this specifically, this slide up specifically. If you're thinking you might want to start at Columbus State or at a community college and then move on to a 4-year college, there are a couple of different things you want to look for. And you want to look for some of the kinds of terms that you're seeing on this site right here. You want to look for things that say things like transfer program, transfer agreement, articulation agreement sometimes is the term that you'll see, transfer partnership, preferred pathway. Those are the kinds of terms you want to look for. That's how you make sure, to the best of your abilities, that the classes that you're taking at the community college are going to transfer to your 4-year destination. Community colleges have transfer advisors available. You want to work with them. You want to sit down and talk with them, even when you're first starting at the community college, and say, you know what, right now, I think I want to try to maximize my opportunities with 4-year transfer. great. They will help you figure out how to do that. Now, again, if you're just going to take a couple of classes and stick your toe in and try some different subject areas out, you can do that too. But if you know that you want to try and start at a community college and then transfer to a four-year program, if you know that's your path, doing one of the preferred pathways really does maximize the transferability. For example, Capital University is listed down here as one of their partners. They had, I think, 13 transfer partners with that preferred pathway down there. And so if you followed one of the prescribed programs that's listed there, so it was doing an Associate of Arts degree or an Associate of Science degree, graduating with a certain GPA, they promise that they will transfer pretty much all of your credits. I think it was all except for 2 of your general education classes at Capital would be covered. So you would have the majority of your first 2 years completely taken. And then they also have access to certain transfer scholarships if you participate in this preferred pathway. Now, one of the potential downsides of starting at a community college and transferring is that you might end up excluding yourself from some possible scholarships. A lot of colleges have a lot of financial aid and scholarships set aside for what are called first-time, full-time freshmen. And so that's really the people who are either coming directly out of high school or who have, graduated high school and done not school-related things and then applied for college. Most of the time they are looking, again, at sort of the students who are just leaving high school immediately. But a lot of the scholarship dollars are set aside and targeted directly for those students. So transfer students, you want to look for places, again, with the transfer pathways, those are places a lot of times that are promising that they have certain scholarships set aside for students who are going to transfer to their campus. So that's one of the ways that you, again, maximize the cost savings as well. Because if you end up taking a bunch of classes at Columbus State and think you're, knocking out a bunch of prerequisites, kind of like what Jeff was saying about, when he was taking the classes in the military, you may turn out that what you're taking doesn't actually transfer the way you think it's going to transfer. There's actually another tool that's available that's out there. It's a website called Transferology. And I'll send the link to Jeff so that he can post it in the notes afterwards too. But it's a website that started a couple of years ago where colleges can opt in. Not every place is on there, but they can opt in and you can actually go in and look at how the class you're taking at this university would transfer to other universities. It's free. It's open to the public. So you can actually just go in and put in, I'm taking English 101 at Columbus State. What's that going to be at Ohio State? And it'll be able to tell you on there. So it's pretty cool. It's a cool resource. Transferring is a lot more complicated than it sounds sometimes. There can be specific prerequisites for programs that are sort of odd little red tape moments. So if you know you want to transfer, like if you're pretty sure you're planning on doing that 4-year degree, really do start planning early on. And I know I said that probably like 5 times with this slide up, but it's that important. It's really that important to know that you want to do that or to decide and sort of keep that option open for yourself. Have those conversations so you can maximize the transferability of the classes that you're taking. So say you're still thinking, I'm not so sure about this whole college right away thing. Gap year, absolutely something that is of huge value to a lot of students. So gap year is pretty much what it sounds like. You take a year off from school after you graduate high school. And there's sort of 2 different ways to do it. The first one is you can actually apply to college while you are senior in high school. And then once you've decided where you want to go, you can request to defer for a year. That's typically how they phrase it. A lot of colleges will approve you if you have a plan other than sitting home and petting the dog. Nothing wrong with sitting home petting the dog, but probably not for the full gap year. So if you have a plan, a lot of colleges will approve it. Not always, not guaranteed, but that's typically going to be an option in a lot of cases. The other way to do a gap year is to just simply say, you know what, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait and apply to college later once I figure out what the heck I want to do. That's also totally fine to do it that way. If you want to do it that way, the one thing I'd encourage you to do while you're still in school, for those of you who are still in school, is to make sure you ask your school counselor what you'll need to do to get your transcripts and any letters of recommendation after you finish high school. Because when you're in high school, when you're in your senior year, if you're at a high school where there's sort of a college-going culture, so everybody or a lot of people, like I know the Dublin schools are very much like this, the schools in Worthington are very much like this, the students who are there a lot of them are going off to college. And so you're sort of on the radar of the school counselor to sort of say like, okay, here's the process, here's how it flows, deadlines, documents, paperwork, all of that. Once you leave your high school, it gets a lot more complicated sometimes because you're not on their radar. You're not sort of in that flow of things while you're there. And especially if you end up doing something like one of these gap year programs that I've listed, if you are working with the FEMA Corps through AmeriCorps and you're in a disaster relief area, you may not have good internet to be able to reach out to your school counselor to fill out a request. So you need to make sure you ask those questions in advance, just so you know what you're getting yourself into, and then you can file it away. That's totally fine. I had students, two students over the last couple of years, very much like Jeff, who took gap years. Both of them were multi-sports varsity athletes over multiple years, and both of them were, strong grades, strong test scores, all of that good stuff. And both of them said, you know what, I'm tired. I'm not sure I want to go to college next year. Maybe not at all. I'm going to take a gap year. And both of them, their parents got really anxious about it, but we talked about it. We said, no, this is fine. It'll be good. So they both, the year after they graduated, both of them got jobs. And so the one of them got a job working construction and the other one got a job in a factory. So both of them, I said, let's check in at the end of the summer and just see how you're feeling. Because if you want to do the college thing next year, then we can talk about sort of getting back in the swing of things. And so the one who worked construction, I checked with him at the end of the summer. I said, how was it? What did you think? And he said, I loved it. I'm not going to college next year. I want to work. I loved having a job. I love not having to come home to study. I know I'm going to go to college someday, but not next year. That's not what I'm doing next year. And so I said, okay, so tell me your plan. And so he talked through his plan, and he had looked into where he was going to go, the kinds of training he wanted to get, where he was going to sort of network to get the jobs. He already had a lead on a full-time job, and he had a backup plan. He said if he didn't have a full-time, sustainable job within 6 months, he was going to enlist in the Army. And so I just got a message from his parents a few weeks ago that he just finished basic training down at Fort Benning, and he is thrilled. They're thrilled for him. He's very happy down there now. He's very glad about the decision that he's made. And then the other guy who worked in the factory, he worked in the factory just this past summer. And at the end of the summer, I said, so how was it? What did you think? And he said, I'm so glad I did this. It was hot. It was so hard. And I am so ready for college. I am so ready for college. And so I started asking him about his experience and, what he's learned and everything like that. And he is so much more clear and so much more focused about everything. I can hear the motivation. I can see it. I can read it in his writing. He is really ready. He knows exactly what he wants to do now. And that's really a great thing to see. I could see how much he matured even over just sort of those 2 to 3 months off from school and that 1 month working, 6 days a week, 10-hour shifts, sweating like crazy. So he's very grateful for that opportunity. And he's very excited about his prospects in college next year, which I think is a good thing for him. So when you do a gap year, you can do structured programs. These are just a couple of different examples. Some of them are volunteer focused. Some of them are work focused. Virtual education is a fairly new one on the scene. And that is actually sort of an alternative first year. It involves travel and a little bit of general education credit so you don't get behind. It's actually a cool model. I met the founder a couple weeks ago at a conference. And it's really, really fascinating what they're doing with it. Some of them do require you to pay. So again, depending on your resources, what you feel like you would want to invest in that year, that's important to think about. AmeriCorps and I believe Habitat for Humanity as well, both actually have education benefits that go along with being a part of them. Now, neither of them are quite as robust as the GI Bill would be, but if you can go and serve in a different capacity for a year and then end up being able to use some money, get some money towards college, I still think that can really be worthwhile for the right student in the right situation. And again, then, you can just find a job here locally as well. I would encourage students, I think this is always an important conversation. If you're going to be living at home still after high school graduation, I would encourage families to talk a little bit about whether or not your student's going to have to start to pay rent. Maybe not market value rent, but how are they going to be contributing to the household if they're working in particular? So that's always a conversation that I think is it's good life practice too for figuring out and understanding how to live on a budget and within your means if you're starting to sort of practice that still while you're living at home a little bit. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how do you find a great fit university for you? Like for students who know they want to go to college or are pretty sure they want to or want to apply or do the research and think about what that would look like, I'm going to share a couple of different tips about how to find a really great fit college. And the very first tip, I told you this was going to come back around again. The very first tip is to evaluate yourself. It's really important when you're thinking about college to know what it is you want to be doing at college. What are the key essential experiences for you? Because quite frankly, colleges can promise you the world. They can promise you everything in the universe. They can promise you 24-hour access to the rec center with the lazy river and great internships and opportunities and study abroad and about 7,000 student activities at a lot of places. But unless you know which of those opportunities you want to take advantage of and that you will take advantage of, it doesn't matter which ones they have. It only matters the ones that are a match with what you actually want. So doing some research, getting familiar with what kinds of things and opportunities are available on college campuses, and then making sure that you find colleges that are going to offer you the opportunities that are right for you, for your education, for your experience. And again, whatever that happens to be, maybe it's having incredible internship opportunities. Maybe it's a place where you're going to be able to work right off campus. Maybe it's a place where, you're an older student and you need to have family housing because you've got a spouse and a kid. Nothing wrong with that. You just need to make sure that you're looking for places that are going to support you in what you want. So tip number 2 then is to compare your current environment with the one you want in college. College is a great opportunity to get out there and to experience something completely different from what you are experiencing in high school. A lot of the students that I work with in Dublin, they talk about being in the Dublin bubble. I'm sure parents have heard that one before. And students elsewhere also sometimes talk about their high school or their community as feeling like they're in a bubble. And so for some students, they really want to get out there and experience something completely different than the school where they have grown up, the community where they've grown up. And especially for students who have lived in the same place their entire lives, maybe they're really going to feel like they want to get out and experience something completely different. Or maybe they think, just a little different. Or, I kind of like the Dublin bubble. I want to go somewhere that feels a lot like this. Or maybe I'm not ready to leave the Dublin bubble. None of those are bad. None of those are wrong. It's important that that you think about it. Do you want to be with people who are a lot like you, that are a lot like Dublin or Worthington or wherever you're watching this from? Or do you want to go somewhere where people have completely different backgrounds? Do you want to be around a community where there's lots of different geographic and religious and faith-based backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds? Do you want to be in the heart of a city? Do you want to be in Amish country? Do you want to be somewhere in between? Again, thinking about those kinds of opportunities really matters. It really matters for you to figure out what's going to be your best fit. And a great college list ultimately should check those boxes either in whole or in part with each of the different colleges. Your environment should be the same or different or however similar or different you want it to be. You really want all of the colleges to sort of make sense in that way, to really sort of check those boxes off. So now I know we have talked a lot about figuring out what you want to do. So tip number 3, a lot of times is a surprise to people. Don't let majors drive your college search. And I say this because we know life is not linear, especially as adults. We know life is not linear. Where you start from is not necessarily where you end up. And if we were in person, I am guessing, because this happens when I give this presentation or this part of the presentation in person, if I were to say, how many of you are doing exactly what you thought you would be doing with your life when you were 17, I don't think I've ever had anybody raise their hand. How many people have a life that looks exactly like you thought it was going to look when you were 17? It's pretty rare that as an adult that you have a life that's identical to what you thought it was going to be at 17. There are lots of twists and turns along the way. And here's the reality. No matter how much research you do, no matter how much homework you do, about half of all college students are going to change their mind about what they want to major in when they're in college. And it really, like I said, it really almost doesn't matter how much research you do. Now, I'm not saying that students should not do their homework. I'm not saying that they should absolve themselves of responsibility of trying to think about what they want to study, or of trying to find a place that's going to offer them academic opportunities that are aligned with what they think they want to study. That's also important. It would be foolish of you, if you know you want to be a civil engineer, it would be foolish of you to go to a university that doesn't offer civil engineering. That doesn't make any sense either. But if you drive your entire college search off of the top 10 business schools that you can get into, and you get in and you go to the school and you realize you hate business, are there enough other factors about that school that you like that it's going to make sense for you to stay? Are you still going to get, again, remember that evaluating yourself piece, are you still going to get what you want out of your education if it turns out that you realize that your major, the major you thought you wanted isn't actually the major you wanted? I worked with a student when I was at Purdue. I was an academic advisor for math, statistics, and actuarial science majors. So I did that for about 3 years when I was there. And one of the students that I worked with, I still remember her, she was from Minneapolis, and she had chosen Purdue specifically because of their actuarial science major. And I didn't know what an actuarial science major was. I didn't know what an actuary was until I started working that job. An actuary is somebody who works for the insurance companies and basically sets the insurance rate. So they're looking at the statistical and mathematical and economic indicators and trying to predict future events, the likelihood of future events, and trying to sort of assign sort of financial likelihoods to those events. So the people who set your insurance rates, pretty much. And the student, she'd come from Minneapolis, and she was really a fantastic student. Came in first 2 years in the major, 4.0 GPA, and all the honors level math classes, like she was rocking the house. She was fantastic. And she had done all kinds of homework and research when she was in high school about what actuaries were and what the job was like and the experience. And she'd shadowed an actuary, and she knew the steps to become an actuary. And she was absolutely sure it was what she wanted. And so she was really talented, and she was so sure about it. She was able to get one of the few internships that were available for students at the end of their sophomore year. I think there were only 2 a year usually at Purdue, and she got one of them. And she came back the following fall, and I asked her how her internship was. And she said, I have to change my major. And I kind of freaked out a little bit on her. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened, Megan? She said, no, nothing happened. Nothing went wrong. It was fine. People were wonderful. I learned a ton. They took great care of me. And she said, but I realized when I got there, I can't spend all day thinking about death every day. And so she had done all the homework. She knew exactly what it was, but it wasn't until she was actually doing it that she realized that she couldn't actually do the job. Like mentally and emotionally, it was not a good fit for her. Even though intellectually she had the capacity, it was just emotionally too hard on her. And so she did end up changing her major to statistics. And she did a minor in religious studies as well. And the next summer, she ended up working for her diocese of her church, putting together survey instruments so that they could survey young people and understand why they were leaving the church or not coming back or staying with the church. She ended up going into ministry instead. And this was somebody, and I mean, I'm thrilled for her, but this was somebody who, was absolutely sure what she wanted and had done everything possible. And still, she ended up going a completely different direction. So fortunately for her, she liked enough other things about Purdue that it was fine for her to stay there. But that's sort of one of the reasons why you really want to think about, is it more than just this major that's making me choose this college? And I hope it is, because making sure that it's a place that fits you on multiple levels is really important to being successful in college. So tip number 4, if you want to have more financial aid, apply to the colleges most likely to accept you. So this is where we start to get into the money part of things here. Paying for college is hard. It's expensive. And so if you want to maximize financial aid opportunities, particularly for families who are sort of in that sort of the middle class squeeze, as I would say, the families who, maybe qualify for a little aid or no need-based aid, but don't maybe qualify for, or can't necessarily write a blank check for 4 years of tuition with no questions asked. This is one of the ways that you can leverage your students' experiences. So again, finding places that are a great fit, but that you're really likely to get into. So, if you're applying to a place that's a reach school, so a place where statistically speaking, the students that they admit are stronger than you are, or one of those crazy places where they reject far more applicants than they say yes to, those are the places that aren't necessarily going to give you scholarship dollars, not because of you, but simply because they may not have to. If you're in sort of the middle 50% of their applicant pool or the bottom 25% of their applicant pool. So if you're a reach for that school, if they do have scholarships to give out, they're more likely to give them out to the students who are in that top 25%. And so you want to take a look at that when you're applying to places. You want to be sort of in that top 25% if you want to sort of maximize those opportunities for you to get those scholarship dollars. And so that's particularly for places that are doing holistic admissions. And holistic admissions means that they're actually looking at all of the different pieces of your application. So they're looking at your grades, they're looking at your transcript, they're looking at your essays, your letters of recommendation, all of those different pieces. They're not just looking at GPA and test scores. There are some places that do just look at that for admission, and that's fine. But for the places that are doing holistic admissions, financial aid is actually one of the ways that they can try to recruit you, believe it or not. Financial aid is not just about what the money you have in the bank. Colleges can actually try to incentivize you to come by saying, you know what, I really like you. I read your application. I think you're fantastic. I think you'd be a great fit. I'm going to try and, I'm going to persuade us to kick in another $10,000 of grant aid or of gift aid, scholarship dollars, so that money you don't have to pay back. That's the good stuff. Because I like you. And I think if we give you this extra scholarship, you're more likely to come here. So, and that kind of thing happens when you're near the top of the applicant pool. It doesn't really happen when you're near the bottom of the applicant pool for a school. So one of the other things you want to look for, I'm going to do sort of a little bit of a sidebar here about minimizing cost for you. There are some schools that do what are called grid scholarships, or that's what they're sort of known as, I guess. It's not a technical term, but that's a pretty common term for them. And you can see it's because it's basically a grid. You have the test scores and the GPA that are listed here, and it tells you exactly how much scholarship you would be eligible for. And I took this off of Miami's website just a couple weeks ago. So depending on when you're watching this, this information may be out of date. So make sure you double check their website. But there are a lot of different places that offer this kind of scholarship, including places like Clemson, University of Utah, Florida Gulf Coast University. Baldwin Wallace in Cleveland actually has grid scholarships as well. And one of the things I like about Baldwin Wallace is they're also test optional. Test optional schools are places that either de-emphasize or have done away with the use of standardized tests in admissions. So they don't require SAT or ACT in order to apply, which is pretty cool. And the thing I like about the way Baldwin Wallace does their grid scholarships is you don't have to submit your test scores still. You can submit a graded paper instead in order to contend for their merit scholarships. A lot of times, even test optional schools will still require standardized tests in order to be able to be considered for scholarships. So you just sort of want to keep that in mind. But you can see right here for an in-state resident, if you have really top-notch SAT or ACT scores, and you've got a pretty rockin' GPA, you actually are eligible for a fairly robust scholarship. And so looking out for these kinds of things are one of the many different ways that you can try to, again, reduce the cost, especially if you're somebody who's thinking like, yeah, I know Columbus State, I can do that. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe that's not where I want to start. Maybe I'm ready to sort of break out and go somewhere else. I want to go to a different state. I want to go away for school. I don't want to stay at home. I'm ready to get out. That happens sometimes. And so if that's you, looking at some places that have these grid scholarships is one way to possibly be able to figure out and predict some of the costs that you're going to have along the way. Other sort of cost-saving options or strategies, in addition to the grid scholarships, you sort of want to look out for some different kinds of opportunities and programs. So for example, co-op, I'm a huge fan of co-op. Cincinnati, actually, University of Cincinnati is where co-op was founded. They were the first university to offer co-op. And co-op is actually short for cooperative education. And basically what you do is you end up, as a student, you end up alternating work and school semesters. And you get paid real money, like full-time money, while you're working. So it really helps cut down on the cost of college because you're actually sort of alternating spending money on tuition with making money in a job. It's not always available for every major. It's pretty common or most commonly found, I guess I should say, with engineering and business majors, sometimes with other STEM majors as well, sometimes with other areas too. But those are the two areas where you're going to see it most often. And that website that's there with the University of Cincinnati and University of Toledo, they actually have a national co-op scholarship program. So students who are attending one of the colleges that are part of this co-op consortium can apply for this additional scholarship that's through that organization. So again, that's one of the really great ways. You can also look for experiential learning, internships, and things like that on different campuses. Another way to sort of reduce some costs are accelerated programs, advanced credits. So accelerated programs, that would be something like, a 4+1 program. And so that would be like you do your bachelor's degree in accounting, and because you're doing so well, you could stay on for just one extra year and earn your master's degree as well. So that's ends up being a shorter duration to get to that master's degree, rather than having to sort of, do 2 to 3 years on top of that for an MBA, depending on, where you are, what you're interested in. There's also, I know Jeff was talking a little bit about some of the advanced credits, some of the credits he had that didn't transfer, and a little bit about life experience too. There's also a program it's not as well known anymore. I think it used to be more popular, but there's a program that's called the College Level Examination Program, or CLEP, which is a really horrible sounding acronym. But the CLEP program, students can actually self-study for different subjects and take a test at a testing center. It doesn't have to be through a university or while you're registered as a student. You can self-study, take that test, and get credit for a class, which is pretty wild when you think about it. Not every university accepts CLEP credits, but again, with careful planning, by doing that, I worked with an adult student when I was at Purdue, and she figured out how to sort of leverage the CLEP credit such that she actually was only at Purdue, I think, for 2.5 years. And every other class that she did was through CLEP credit. And she was an adult student. She had, gone out and was working her way through school still at that point. But that was a pretty smart way for her to do that. So again, careful planning, looking into those opportunities, those advanced credit kinds of options, as well as like AP or IB credit for students who are taking those, or college credit plus kinds of classes, which that's something where transferology could help you with planning for college credit plus in terms of how that might apply elsewhere. I also have a couple of different places down here. These are places that are very unique, and to me, quite frankly, they're fascinating. The work colleges, these are places that are classic liberal arts colleges, which are, the places that mostly get a bad rap these days. Although I'm a proud liberal arts graduate, so I don't think that there's a need for them to get a bad rap. And that's a more philosophical conversation than we have time for today, I have to say. But the work colleges are places where students go in and they actually work. All students work on campus, and not just like work study jobs. So they're not just like working in the library, in the cafeteria, but for example, Berea College down in Kentucky, students get, and I think it's a highly reduced tuition, or it might even be no tuition. I can't remember the specific details, but basically they go on the campus and they're working. So they are the custodians, they are grounds, they are in the dining halls. So there are staff as well, but the students are really actually working their way through college on the college campus as part of it's essentially their financial aid, their tuition. So it's literally work study at those colleges. And it's a small group. There aren't a ton of them, but they're really interesting places, and not right for every student. But again, one of those places where if you're interested in sort of getting out and having an adventure, that's one opportunity as well. Deep Springs College is really, truly a unique program. They were men only until I believe it was last year, and now they are a co-ed campus. But it's only a 2-year program, associate's degree program, but it's highly respected, very interesting, and it is a working ranch in California. So you are literally living and working on a ranch. It's a very unconventional education, but for students who find it intriguing, it's a really cool opportunity. And again, because you're on a working ranch, you are working your way through college, literally and figuratively. One other thing I wanted to talk about here, also ROTC, I didn't even put on here because I knew Jeff was going to be talking about military, but ROTC is another possible way to get some cost savings in school. And you can look at places, for example, Capital. A student could go to Capital and participate in ROTC. At Capital, through Ohio State. So they're at Capital, they're a student at Capital, but they're actually participating in Ohio State's ROTC. So that there are sorts of those kinds of agreements at a lot of different colleges and in a lot of different areas. So again, with military service as an obligation afterwards, but for the right student, you sort of, can go to school and get paid to go to school, then you go and serve your country, and then you come back out again. So that's another alternative way to consider helping to finance your time in college. One other thing that I wanted to mention here while we're thinking about this, in terms of student loans and what have you, I personally am not opposed to student loans in small amounts. I think it's okay for students to have a little bit of skin in the game. And for some students, that's the only way that they can really do it at this point. And again, I know that that's a personal opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with that, and that's fine. You need to do what's right for you and for your family. Completely understood. But for families who are open to considering some student loans, you do want to make sure you don't go crazy. Right now, the conventional wisdom, what a lot of people will tell you, is make sure that you don't take out more in student loans over the 4 years than your student's first year salary would be. So if you expect your student is going to graduate and be an actuary, for example, and their starting salary is probably going to be in the mid 50s, most likely, then theoretically you would be safe taking loans up to mid 50s. Now you can already see, I'm not super excited about that by my air quotes. I really think that that's not a great approach, quite frankly. I think that you should, not try and exceed about 25,000 if you can. It's still not nothing. That's still a substantial debt, but 25,000 for a lot of students ends up being relatively manageable-ish, comparatively speaking. Lots of hedging language there. But then the other thing is that also helps protect you against your student who thinks they want to be an actuary, who then goes into ministry like Megan. I don't know whether or not she had student loans. But for a student in that kind of a situation, imagine if you had, made a plan to take out debt for somebody who's going to graduate and get a salary in the mid 50s. And then your student says, guess what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go into ministry instead. Right. That all of a sudden that financing, even though you planned for it, that financing doesn't work. So I just want to sort of make that little comment here as well. So I'm headed off to now my final tip. What time? Oh, we're doing okay time-wise. Almost done. This is my last tip here. If you want to stand out, you need to have a remarkable college career. And it's what you do in college that matters more than where you go. And so remarkable college career, remarkable means worthy of notice or attention. And so when students are in college, they want to be sure that they're making the most of the opportunities that are there. And that's part of why fit matters so much, because students who feel like they fit in at their college, students who feel like the college is offering them the opportunities that they're excited about taking advantage of, they're more likely to take advantage of those opportunities and to really make the most out of them. And so, maybe having a remarkable college career is that you work your way through college and you pay for every penny on your own. That would be pretty remarkable these days. That's not easy to do. Or maybe it's going and being the president of a student organization who triples in membership while you're there. Or maybe it's going and running a fundraising for a local charity and managing to increase their donations by 3 times. Maybe it's working on research with a professor and getting published. Maybe it's getting a patent while you are doing a co-op. All of those are possibilities through college. It just sort of depends on where you go, what opportunities you take advantage of. So it's important to, really make the most of the opportunities that are in front of you wherever you go, no matter what they are, because this is actually where it's at when it comes to college. It's actually making the most of the opportunities that are in front of you. That's really where it's at. So I will also make sure that Jeff has these as well, so that we can put these in the little link afterwards and send them out. These are some of the different websites that I think are really particularly helpful. The top blog right there, that is actually another college-wise counselor, but I'm absolutely enamored with this blog. She, every week, every Friday, she updates this, and it's her When I Was 17 series. And she goes and she interviews different successful adults and asks them what they thought their life would be like when they were 17, and what sorts of educational opportunities, what sorts of career opportunities did they take advantage of, what missteps did they have, what changes in direction did they have, how did they end up where they are now. She's been doing this for, I think, about 3 years now, if I remember correctly. It's really, really, I think it's fascinating. And she's got some really interesting stories on there and a pretty good archive as well. All different fields, all different disciplines, all different academic backgrounds, and some of them are very non-academic as well. So it's really interesting stuff. If you want just straight up admissions advice, I think Kevin's blog, he's the founder of CollegeWise, so I'm a little biased about that one, as well as Georgia Tech's admissions blog. Really, their blog is not about Georgia Tech, it's about college admissions, and it is one of my favorites. Absolutely love it. If you want to do College Search, Big Futures website. And then Mike Rowe, I think probably, if you're watching this, you probably know who he is, the Dirty Jobs guy. He's got this foundation and he's got a scholarship that's a part of it for students who are planning on studying skilled trades, basically. So if you want to be an electrician, you might be able to get a scholarship through his foundation. It's pretty good stuff. And then there are a couple of other financial aid bits down here, including net price calculators. This is something that every college is supposed to have on their website since, I think it was 2012, 2013. There's a federal law requiring these. And you can Google net price calculator and whatever college name you're looking at. If you want to get a rough idea of what kind of money you would have to spend on that particular college, that's a good starting place. The quality of the estimates on them vary, but it is a resource that's out there and available. And then I'm just going to do a quick little pitch for CollegeWise. We have a ton of free resources on our website, including a bunch of different guides that we've written, how to create a great common application, how to literally fill it out, visiting campuses, even if you can't visit campuses, planning for summer, guide to athletic recruiting. We also do, as I mentioned before, we do a ton of free webinars and stuff. That's the series of upcoming ones. If you're watching this after those dates, that's fine. You can get on our mailing list and get signed up for a future one as well. You'll get notifications about them. We typically do 1 or 2 a month, sort of depending. So we've got free stuff. You can also get our newsletter. And if you're interested in potentially hiring me or one of our other counselors to help you and work with your family, you can do that through our website as well. So that is the end of my part of the presentation. And now we can do some Q&A, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. That was fantastic. You're such a absolutely incredible resource. Oh, wait, there we go. All right. Make sure I'm actually in my camera view. I know. Yeah. Okay. All right. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So, so I have a couple things.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I think, some of my favorite things from that talk and kind of key takeaways there are I love keeping your options open as you start to make some of your choices. So if you start thinking about a gap year, or even if you start thinking about, that's running through your brain of, I just don't know. I thought that was just fantastic advice to go ahead, go through the process. Just put the application in and kind of see what happens. And then, fantastic advice. I think a lot of people don't know that you can defer to the next year, which I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And like I said, you can't do that every place. You can't do it every year. There are a lot of other factors that are unfortunately completely out of your control.
Right.
But that's one of the possibilities out there. And the other thing too, like I've also had some students who have said, I'm only going to apply to these 2 schools. And if I don't get into these big name schools, I'm just going to take a gap year. And then they get to the end of the year and they're like, well, crap, I regret that choice now.
Right.
Because then they're realizing that maybe they don't want to take a gap year. So I'm a big fan of what I call parallel planning, which is sort of here's the thing I think I want to do now, and here's the other thing that I would do if that one doesn't work out. You work both plans at the same time.
Right.
And then you're pretty well covered.
Yeah. And I think it gives, again, it's like you're basically being given free time, and you can make the right decision for you at any time given that path.
Exactly.
Under self-evaluation, I had put, I think it's a hard thing for kids at that time to like almost take dedicated time to kind of sit and think about some of those things. Like, and even time where I say, hey, you're going to take dedicated time to think. Like, I think that even for people is tough.
Yeah.
So, I think, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I think something that might be of interest in that is, you had said, go to a college that has activities and things that really interest you, that you're going to take advantage of.
Yep.
And so, I think a lot of times with some of these college visits and stuff, like that might be a thing. Like if you're interested in, law school, like check out the debate club and see if you can go and be a part of that and take action on it when you're in high school, to see if that's something that would even interest you. And
Absolutely.
so you can, I'm sure that when you start to visit some of these colleges or take care of some of these opportunities when you're making your choice from a self-evaluation standpoint, go and actually participate. Go and see if you would want to participate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And anytime students can sort of have that increased level of self-awareness, so identifying, even if it's just one or two must-haves for your college experience, and go and check out the debate club, that example, go and check out the debate club and talk about that. Students who have that level of self-awareness, generally speaking, you're going to choose colleges that are a better fit for you, which means that you're going to get more money from them. I promise you it actually does happen that way.
Right.
And you're also going to have better outcomes because you're more likely to actually go take advantage of the things and graduate in 4 years.
Right.
So it's a win all around.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and you're kind of piggybacking on that, your thoughts on, I think, cost saving stuff is just fantastic. And there's free money out there. And I think so many people just kind of like run this path down the middle and don't realize how many opportunities there are available to them. Grid Scott, almost everything that you gave there, I had no idea of. And that's all stuff that I'm sure there's so many people that are going into these opportunities just don't think about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of this whole, part of our mission with CollegeWise really is to make sure that people know that these things exist, that these are out there, that it's not, that financial aid exists, that there is gift aid available. And you're not necessarily, and I'm not saying that every student is going to get a full ride everywhere they apply. That's also not realistic. But for students who are at or near the top of their class, you might end up getting more bank than you realize. Again, if you're sort of paying attention, following steps, and applying to places that are really excited to have you, where you're going to be the big fish in the pond.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of this stuff too, you're filling out extra paperwork. Mm-hmm. It's like if I were to sit there and tell you, hey, fill out this 10-page thing and you might get $30,000.
Yep.
Who wouldn't do that? And but a lot of it's just that lack of awareness.
Yes, exactly.
So I think those are my key takeaways. And again, you're just such a wealth of information on that. So I appreciate your time. Yeah. We have only one question, which has nothing to do with our topic for the day, but I figured I'd answer it anyway. Joe Olierski, who I don't know who that is, I don't think, but why are eggs better for you at breakfast than cereal? And he said, healthy cereal without a lot of sugar. So I figured I'd answer anyway. Why not, right? So your big reason why is, we like to think about eating highly nutritious foods, right? And eggs are a highly nutritious food. They're a complete source of protein. So they kind of feed hungry muscles. They're a complete protein from an amino acid profile. So eggs are very, very nutritious from that kind of end of things to start your day. Conversely, cereal a lot of times is going to be a processed carbohydrate that we don't necessarily get a lot of nutrients from, and depending on what type of milk, also highly processed. And so the amount of nutrients that we're going to be getting from that isn't going to be fantastic in comparison if we're just comparing eggs to carbs. And then you also think that a lot of cereal is going to be high glycemic in nature, which means that we kind of start our body on this kind of negative insulin path throughout the day. So I'll tag Joe in that. But I know we had people kind of jumping on and off, and so we'll post this up. And if you guys have further questions, you can continue to comment on this video on YouTube, or you guys can always send us or me an email, and we can kind of go through, and I can send you guys into the right direction and send you the slide deck and stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Meredith.
I'll share my slide deck with you, Jeff, too, so that you can share that out as well.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a fantastic day. Meredith, I'm going to end the stream, but we can stay on the meeting. So.